Hey there, my students. In this hand sewing video, I'm going to show you how to do the 4 hemming stitches, and I'm going to go in order of the handout I gave you in class. So I'm going to be showing you stitches or hemming stitches 7, 8, and 9 and 10. So I'm going to go in the order of the handout. So this here is the hemming stitch. Then we have the slip stitch, the catch stitch, and we have the blind stitch. But it may throw you off here with the basting. Don't let it confuse you, but there is the blind stitch in there. All right, so let's get started. Let's start with the hemming stitch. Before we get started on all 4 of the hemming stitches I'm going to show you, I folded over first about 1/4 of an inch of the edge of the fabric, pressed it with my iron, and folded over double that, about 1/2 an inch, and I pressed it with my iron, and now I have my hem that's ready. I just used the straight pin there to hold it down. You can even base stitch it if you want. It's totally up to you. So I have my single threaded needle with a knot on the end. And what I'm going to do is start inside or behind the hem here, about 1/4 of an inch down. So you can make your first mark with your disappearing ink pen if you'd like to make sort of like a mark to understand where your 1/4 of an inch is. Actually, I'm going to move it down a little lower because I'm very good at eyeing, and that's about 1/4 of an inch. So here we go. It's back there, the knot, I've hidden it, and now you don't see it. And now what I'm going to do is go diagonal. Now I am left-handed, so I'm going from left to right, but chances are you're probably right-handed, so you can start on this side, working with your right hand, going towards the left. It's basically the same thing, just opposite. So now I'm going to go diagonal about 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to pick up just 1 or 2 of the threads of the fabric, I mean, and I'm going to pull it so it sits on a diagonal there. And then I'm going to go back behind the hem, and the length of the stitch, not the depth. The depth is about 1/4, but the length is about 1/2 an inch. So I'm going to pull it about there. I'm going to eye it, and here we go. Back there again, and now I go diagonal. Pick up a few threads, back under. See, I poked the fabric a few times because I just try to get it as exact as I can. And I just keep repeating this. Pick up a few threads, go behind the hem, down, I picked up too many there. There we go. And you just keep repeating this process. So just to show you, with your hem gauge, your length here, so your length of the stitch is about 1/2 an inch. So this is your length. I'll point with this. And then this here, the depth is about 1/4 of an inch. So you're going to continue this hemming until you get to the end. And then we will fasten it or save it at the end and knot it. As you're sewing, if you want to make marks where your increments are, because maybe you can't get your hem stitches kind of around your 1/2 inch here and 1/4 inch, what you could do is you can mark it like this. So you can just make your 1/2 inch marks, and you can actually bring that down 1/4 of an inch. So you can make your, marks just like that. And then you know exactly where to bring that needle through, just in case this is, your first time and you're kind of finding that your hemming stitches are getting larger or shorter or whatever the deal is. So behind. And you continue all the way until you get to the end. And now that I've gotten to the end of my hemming stitch, I'm going to show you how I ended off, also hiding it behind the actual fold or the hem there. So my last stitch is about here, and when I bring it back there, let me just finish. Okay, so the back looks like this. You barely see any, it's barely visible. What I do is I bring it to the back right here, and I do an end off stitch behind the actual hem. So I fold it over a bit, and I get my needle in there, and right on that last stitch I tie it. 1 and 2 always. Go right back in through there and tie it. And there we go. It is secure, cut, and this regular hem is done. And now I'm going to show you the slip stitch. So again, I have my hem folded where I first folded 1/4 inch, then 1/2 inch, and I gave it a press. Here is my single threaded needle with my knot on the end, and this time I'm going to hide the knot right in this fold here. So when I start, I'm going to bring it right up in here, and I'm going to pull it until the knot stops. And now what I'm going to do is take up a few threads or fibers right there. So in and out. See how I just took a few of those fibers right there? I'm going to pull. Then I'm going to bring my needle back into the hem. So let me show you what I mean by this. I'm going to bring it right into that crease where you made with the iron or finger. And you see how like my needle's in there? It's like kind of guided by that crease. I'm going to bring that needle over about 1/4 inch. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pick up a few of the fibers right there. And of course I'm using a dark maroon thread so that you can see the stitches, but typically it would be nearly invisible. So again, I'm going to pick up a few of the threads right there, 1 and 2, pull. Let me just fix that. Okay, pull, then I'm going to put it back into the, I'm going to call it the crease of the hem. Go about 1/4 inch, pull. And now let me do this one by one so you could see what I'm doing when I pick up the threads. In case you didn't get it, I'm going to take a little bit of the fabric there. So just like 1 or 2 threads, pull. I'm going to put it right back in there. And then in through the hem. And what I mean by that is when I go through the hem is literally my needle is right in here, resting in there. Okay, so I'm going to pick up a little bit of that crease. I'm going to go right back into the hem. Here we go. I'm struggling here. All right, here we go. And then again here. So when you get really good at it, you can actually do your quick little picking of your fabric there and right into the hem. But if you're not, then you can just do it here. You go up. And then pick your fabric again, a few threads, and then go in the hem. And again, when you practice and you feel really comfortable with it, you can just go right ahead like this. A few fibers. And right back through the hem crease. Now that I've reached the end of my slip stitch, what I'm going to do is tie it off so that it doesn't come out. And I'm going to go back right under that same stitch there, that last one, and I'm going to put my needle through the loop and make a tight little knot there. And you can double it up again if you'd like. So you see my thread, of course, because I'm using red with this whiter fabric. But in reality, if it's your pants, you would match the thread so that you don't see it. And then what I'm going to do just to make it look nice is go back in through the crease just to hide my thread. So go back in as if I'm doing a stitch, but I'm really not. I'm going to pull it just to hide it and cut it right off. And now you don't see the end of the thread or really the knot. So again, you do see some of the markings on the back, but it nearly is invisible if you have a coordinating thread, and that's the slip stitch. Moving on to the catch stitch. So I have threaded my thread right through and under the hem there, so I hide the knot. And I've also given myself, and you may do this as well, 1/2-inch increment marks, just so I can eye and sort of keep my catch stitch quite uniform. So since I'm left-handed, I'm going to work from right to left, and if you're right-handed, you go the opposite way. So once I'm here, I'm going to go in between my increment marks there, just grab a few of the fibers, and I'm going to go across. And when I come down and I make my stitch here, I'm just going through the hem. You don't want to go through the back there. Okay, so just the hem you're picking up. Then you come up and you go diagonal across right about here. Pick up a few fibers. That's a little more. Here we go. And then you, let me just get myself situated here. You pull through. And then again, down here this is about 1/8 of an inch of a stitch. And come up across. A few fibers right under that hem. And of course my needle slipped out. But as you can see here, what's happening is I am making these crisscrosses that look like the lopsided X's. And there is nothing on the back except these little prick marks. This is the struggle of being a left-handed person. There's always something. And now that I've gotten to the end of my catch stitch, what I'm going to do is go right under or near my very last stitch there and just tie a knot. So I literally put my thread and needle right under that last one there. And as I'm pulling, I'm going to put my needle through that loop. And I'm going to do that again. And of course, you would have a coordinating thread, so you wouldn't even see this on whatever garment you're doing this on. And I'm going to just feed my needle in through the crease, just like I did before. Here we go. Just to hide the end of my thread. And then I trim it, and it is done. Of course, you can tuck that right in there. You see a few little points there because I'm using a darker thread, and that is the catch stitch. Now we're moving on to the blind stitch, the last stitch I'm going to show you. So what we want to do first is we want to actually put a slip stitch about 1/8 of an inch down from this top hemline here, and then we can really continue. So about 1/8 of an inch down is here. And I'm just going to give myself light little marks. This is a sample, so I'll know exactly where to sew this. So now I'm going to baste through all of them, or all of the layers, just making sure I'm straight here. Yep, here we go. It doesn't really matter the width of my stitches. What matters is that I have the 1/8 inch away from the top edge. Just straightening it out. Okay, and now actually I'm gonna lift that one higher. There we go. And I'm going to just give it one light tack on the back, or one end off stitch right on the back. Doesn't really matter front or back, it's coming out as well. Okay, so I'm gonna leave that as is. Now let's continue. I need this 1/8 of an inch fabric here folded over, so I'm on my ironing mat and I'm going to actually fold it over and give it a press so that it stays. You can try finger pressing yours depending on what fabric you have. It may stay, but I know mine won't without the iron. So I'm just going to give it a press until it stays folded over. And now we'll start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my needle through this space in here. So I'll be working on the underside of this hem, or on this side here. Okay, so I just put my needle in through so that I could hide the knot in there. And when I'm putting my needle through, I'll be sort of like in the center of this 1/8 of an inch small little hem that we created here. And what you're going to do from here is you're going to go down about a quarter of an inch. Take literally a thread of this fabric, come up, and then come back here. And over here, you're going to go in, but you're going to make sure you don't come out or else it won't be blind. Okay, you're just going to go in between these two fabrics. And you can make this stitch about a quarter of an inch. See, I'm checking. I didn't go through. And I pull. Now I go back down. So you're kind of creating these V's. I go back down here. Grab literally about a thread. Then come up. Make about a quarter of an inch in the center there. Do a check. My needle didn't go through. Pull. Back down here. And these are about in length or in depth a quarter of an inch. And these here about a quarter of an inch. And when you're making the point of that V, you're literally taking up 1 or 2 little fibers. 1 is even better. So you can see it's taking me time to grab that one because you do want it to be invisible on this side. Right now you're seeing the hem stitch there. I'm sorry, the quick basting stitch. And now you're going to continue. See, I came through on this side. You don't want that. All right. So I iron mine. That's why it's giving me. They're kind of like stuck together, these fabrics, but there we go. I always check before I pull it through because I don't want to be sorry after to have to restart. Good. And back down. and just continue until you get to the end. So now that I've finished off this blind stitch, what I'm going to do to end it off is I'm just going to bring my needle through that last stitch there and create the loop that I always do and put my needle through it to make a knot. I'm going to do this like 2 or 3 times just to ensure that my knot is tight enough or strong enough, really. I think 2 is good there. So for the sample one, you can leave the basting stitch in if you decide. But of course, if this is a garment, you would just cut the basting stitch and pull it right out. So again, it's your choice if you leave it. But when you're done and you fold this over, you will see your sort of V stitches there. And on this side, it will be actually invisible. Of course, that's the basting stitch, but you don't really see your little stitches. And that again is the blind stitch. And once you're done with your 4 hemming stitches, you can go ahead and attach the sample that came out nice and you really like to your cardstock that goes into your sample technique book.